If we can bring in Laura now to the Robert Scott Bell Show. Laura Aboli, did I say it right?
That's right, Aboli. Well done.
What's the hooray, I got it. Super Don thought I wasn't going to get it. In fact, I thought I wasn't going to get it. But Laura, what's the origin of the last name? Is it Italian? Where does that go?
Yes, the surname is, I'm not Italian, but the surname is Italian. So definitely Aboli. It's not an easy one. Most people
Well,
don't get
it rhymes with Napoli. There you go.
Okay.
That's right.
There
That's
you go.
to remember for most people. That's right. Yes.
Excellent. Well, our buddy Kevin connected with you on what is that app? It's called Telegram, right? We have a Fans of RSB show that Kevin set up, and he said to me, he said, Laura's doing amazing work. She's got loads of followers there, and you really need to interview her. I'm like, all right, Kevin, let's go. And I was reading about you, and you have also a website, and we have it linked up in the show notes at robertscottbell.com. Let me just pull it up for everybody to see as we scroll down in the notes so you can see for everybody that's here, our special guest. And you have been an entrepreneur for a long time now, over 20 years, and you founded or co-founded World Check, a database of politically exposed persons. That's interesting. Heightened risk individuals and organizations. I mean, you've got a very fascinating background, how you're looking at the world and you're tweaking it in some way, not straight on like, well, I understand what you're doing. Okay, I'm not sure what she's doing, but it looks really interesting. So tell me a little bit about that backstory of how you got involved in all the things you do.
Well, it was back in the year 2000 that I co-founded WorldCheck, which basically was the first database of high-risk individuals. So at the time, every country had its own regulatory blacklists. In the U.S., the most famous is OFAC, the Office of Foreign Asset Control. And these were blacklists that no bank could ever deal with certain names, certain people, certain companies, because they were blacklisted, basically. And so we decided that we would collect all of these regulatory lists, but also start doing our own research to start creating profiles on high-risk individuals. And so we collected data on human traffickers, drug traffickers, terrorists, money launderers, you name it, the whole array of delightful people. But when 9/11 then happened, there was a whole very strong push for the whole financial industry to really start identifying people that they were doing business with. And so there was a push for identifying anybody that was what they called politically exposed, which were known as PEPs. So these were the politically exposed persons, which was anybody in a political role or in any federal role in the U.S., for example, and their relatives, actually. So
in other words, you determine vulnerability in terms of how somebody could be played and twisted or muscled by that. Now, it's a little bit scary what you're talking about as well, because we've seen since 9/11 and the Patriot Act, which is anything but patriotic, where they started profiling Americans who simply had political ideals that may be aligned with statements made by the founding fathers of America, and that they have also been kind of, let's say, smeared with this thing, or even no-fly lists, which maybe there are some people that shouldn't be on a fly list, but a lot of people simply don't belong on that list. So how were you able to address the issues of the failures? Because if we go to 9/11, to some degree, I would argue it's a failure of what we call the security state or the CIA, all of these FBI things, that they actually failed that this could happen. Or, as some have argued, and I think rightfully so, that there was a plan and a plot and there were many compromised people within our own government. And again, so it's a really interesting arena that you entered into back in 2000.
Very, very interesting arena. And I have to confess that back in 2000, I was not red-pilled, as one would say now. I was very young. I was very enthusiastic about what we were doing. And I really felt that we were contributing positively to combating a lot of corruption and a lot of bad things that were happening in the world. And I think we did. But you're right. Ever since, there's been such a push towards actually identifying people just for their beliefs, and we've seen censorship right now like never before, at least in our lifetime. I've never seen censorship like right now. And so it's a good thing, I guess, that I got out of that business when I did, because I don't think I could have probably continued to do so right now, with what I know and how I feel about the world and the elites that control us at the moment. So yeah, interesting background. I then went on to create another database of the wealthiest people in the world. So my background is really in the intelligence gathering sort of side of things. I am now involved in other businesses, but I guess that just got me into this frame of mind of being extremely inquisitive and trying to scratch the surface of things and getting to the bottom of things. And when the COVID pandemic struck 2 years ago, I could just see where we were heading. I was getting very agitated and very anxious and very frustrated and very angry. And that's what led me to start my movement and to start my Telegram channel. I only started not even a year ago, but it was just from a need to be able to empower people with information in a way that was not destructive, but in a way that would empower them and feel that there was something that we could all do, because we can. That is the point. We can change things around.
Well, those wealthy elitists that you cataloged often don't want us to be empowered. They love it that they got the power and we don't. So what was it that, as you mentioned the term red pill, that red pilled you? Was it the COVID last couple of years, or was there a preceding evolution of red pills that you took to the time of COVID and said, oh, this is it, I've got to switch this around?
Absolutely. No, my journey started in the year 2012, just because there were big things that happened in my personal life that shook me to my core, and that started me asking questions as, who am I and why am I here and what is the meaning of life? And so my entire journey started with very fundamental, very transcendental questions of, what is this all about, right? And that leads to another question and another question, and then suddenly you find yourself understanding this matrix that we live in and how twisted it is and how much we are under the control of an illusion. And that, so when 2020 started and the whole pandemic started, I kind of knew the behind of it, and I kind of knew where it could lead us to. And that's why I felt I really needed to do something. But the journey started in 2012. It's been 10 years of learning things, going through or down many rabbit holes, many painful ones, many scary ones, as you know, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. No, in the early years, this was back in the 90s when I was researching how the world really works. There were times where I was afraid to come out from under the covers. I will tell you that, honestly. You're under the covers like, I don't want to come out. I know too much. And a lot of people that do this kind of research lose their minds. I'm not kidding. They become emotionally unstable and dare I say paranoid, even though you're not really paranoid if somebody's actually out to get you. But I acknowledge that too. But I would argue that we must have a strong spiritual foundation or spiritual center to be able to see this and yet not become overwhelmed and destroyed by it. Now, before you get into an answer of that and get into that discussion, your accent is very unique. I can't pick it out. What was the origin point? Where did you come onto this planet and learn to speak? What was the language originally, and and your journey to here?
Well, I think I have always been a very outspoken person by nature. I have always spoken my mind. I have never followed trends or people or society. I've led my life in quite a different way to most people, even down to the education of my children. I chose to homeschool them. I didn't like the educational system. I was just too aware of too many things to follow the crowd and follow the norm. So I've never done that. And so one thing led to another, I guess, in my own journey. And as you were just pointing out, because the journey of becoming aware of the nature of this world or part of it is so scary, I felt that I could perhaps help in that process for a lot of people that are beginning to understand how things work and who pulls the strings and why we are where we are and what it's all about. It's a very delicate journey and a very scary one. And so I felt that it could be done in a way that empowers people instead of terrorizing them, because we've got the mainstream media to do that already. That's kind of the last thing that we need to be doing. We need to be making people aware, but at the same time telling them, the fact that you're now aware empowers you to do something about it. And it empowers you to make better choices for yourself and your life, for your family. We're now in a place where we're having to make really important decisions about our health. And so the fact that people are informed to make better decisions is a wonderful thing.
Laura, I'm trying to establish a little bit of history for you here. Were your parents an influence on your independent spirit of mind? Was it the political system you grew up under that you witnessed something? What was it that, because not everybody is like this, understand. I think you know that. But it's a fascinating journey to get where you are, to be not only brilliant, but willing to step out of the box, right? And even though you've been inside it and operated within the high echelons of it, to do what you do, there's some place in you or an experience you've had or maybe within the family or outside that said, I have the strength to do this. And I just, what were the formative years? Anything that stands out for you in your memory?
Well, I think my family definitely is the biggest part in making me the person that I am, that I was, that I'm becoming. They're always there. I have a very, very close relationship with my parents, with my brother and my sister. My father is an artist, so by nature he's a bohemian, open-minded type of character. My mother is an incredibly analytical person, very forward-looking, very critical of things, very curious. And so I grew up in an environment where we talk a lot at home. There was never a television in the place where we would have lunch or dinner. And so every occasion we were sitting around the table, it was about talking. And it was about talking about what was happening in the world or what was happening in our lives or whatever, crossed our minds at that time. And I think that was the foundation to becoming someone that just doesn't take things at face value, someone that actually looks at everything with an inquisitive mind and wonders, why did something happen and what is behind that and who is behind that, right? So definitely my upbringing from a family point of view made a huge difference in becoming, someone that was just not going to take things because you were told to.
Right. So no calls for censorship at the dinner table then.
No, definitely not. On the contrary, everything was very open, and we just love discussing everything, and I still do every day. Basically, I discuss things with my mother or my brother, and we all have different personalities, and it's a wonderful thing to get everybody's perspective on something, because they're slightly different. Even though we're luckily on the same page, I haven't had to fight my closest family when it comes to vaccines or a lot of the things that are happening right now. I feel very, very deeply for people that have seen their own families break apart because of this situation that we have at the moment. I really feel it's very painful. I've suffered it with friends and with people that I very much loved, that we've come very separated or apart because there's this division at the moment, which has not only to do whether you want the vaccine or you don't want the vaccine, or whether you're pro-choice or you're not. I think it has to do with the fact that we're really going through a transformation of humanity at the moment. And there are those that are beginning to see that. And there are those that are beginning to see that things could be so much different and that we deserve so much better. And those that are so consumed by living in the system, so consumed by living in this matrix, that they can't see further than a meter in front of them, and they just follow whatever they're told. And so there's this great ridge that is occurring at the moment between some of us and others, which is very painful when it happens within relationships and within families. So I'm very conscious of that. I'm very aware, and I try to support people that are going through that.
We have your website linked up, Laura, and the last name Aboli, Aboli. And there's an article here, and you have a number of articles. One is David versus Goliath. This is a kind of an age-old, when people hear David versus Goliath, immediately images come to mind and thoughts come to mind. And you write about it in context of what we're going through right now. And how do you perceive the David versus Goliath manifesting in terms of, was it a global governance thing, or is it like the Canadian government trying to, jab all of its truckers and starve the people? I mean, there's a lot of layers to this.
There is a lot of layers, and I see it in the sense that when you start becoming aware of how the world works and who is in control of the world and how much power they actually have over us, or they think they have over us, or actually they've made us believe that they have over us, it really is a situation of feeling like David versus Goliath. The system is Goliath, the elites that control us are Goliath, and each and every one of us is that David. And in that blog of mine and in that article, I was trying to express, or to put the point across to people that David beat Goliath, and we can beat the system. And the fact that it's not there, there's just not one of us. Yes, we are, each and every one of us is David, but together we can change everything and anything. But I was also making the analogy that as much as this can be turned around when we all get together, and unity is definitely one of the biggest weapons that we have, is when we all come together. Part of this process and this transformation that I believe that humanity is going through currently has to happen within ourselves. And so we have to empower ourselves to become that David that believes that can beat the system. Mm-hmm. And that can only be done when you understand where we come from and who we are, and the fact that we're not just this flesh and bone, but that we have a soul, that we have a spirit, that we have a connection to something so much bigger than us, but that it is within us. And when we understand this, suddenly we're not just this little ant that someone can just squash easily. We are so much greater. And so I always try to put across this message to people that they are so much more that they have been led to believe. You need to understand that those in power need to constantly be feeding us this information of, or this communication of making us feel less than we are.
Right. No, they're invested in diminishing our, I think, our true spiritual origin point and capacity. We've heard others say it like, be the superhero of your own journey, right? And yet that superhero status is typically relegated to an external force, per se, whether it be a political savior or something along those lines. And that direction ultimately is driven us into a materialistic view of the world where we have lost connection with the divine. And I think that what's happening for our benefit is to recognize the things that have come so easy to us, particularly in the Western world, the basic things that were covered, food and shelter and clothing. For most part, again, there are always people that are suffering in some way, shape, or form. I don't deny that. But for the most part, these cultures, America, Canada, even a lot of Western Europe, have found that in the last decades, they've had access to just about everything they wanted without having to work that hard to get it. And I mean this by, you don't have to grow your own food, right? And you can still eat. This is a unique anomaly in the history of humanity, right? You either have to hunt and gather or grow. And now it's like you just appear magically, this food at the grocery store or the corner store, whatever. And now we're being threatened with, wait a second, that food that just was automatic, now you're telling me it's not there, right?
Yep.
The supply chain disruptions, whether it be Trudeau's impacts or Biden's impacts or other things in terms of oil and costs and such. And I think that the empowerment that I'm trying to discuss is my own journey for those. When I talk about growing food, and we built the greenhouses, and we're preserving food and doing things that our ancestors did because it was a matter of survival, we've lost that sense and appreciation for how delicate life is when we've had it so easy. And I'll say one more example, and I'll turn it back over to you. When I went to West Africa twice, once with my wife and visited, and we saw the different standards of living. Even though it's, there's a lot of Western influence there, even like in Ghana and Nigeria, but particularly Nigeria, meeting the people there, they didn't all have a reasonable expectation when they woke up in the morning that they would live through the day. You understand? That's a weird thing. It's like, because the average American unexpected catastrophes occur, but for the most part, you go to bed, you wake up, you're like, okay, I'm going to go about my day, and you don't think about the end of your day being the end of your life. And so in that sense, I saw a great appreciation for every breath that they took. And I thought, wow, and very deeply spiritually connected, because I think they realized they had to be in order to survive, to navigate the world, to go, hey, don't go left turn here. That could be a roving group of bandits that will hack you up. versus, oh my gosh, I'll be late for an appointment if I go the wrong way. So I'm just layering it out in terms of intensity of our lives as well. And when I saw that and witnessed that, I said, my gosh, how much we've taken for granted when life became so easy. And not that I wish hardship on anybody, but the hardships that I've endured have strengthened me. And I'm better for it. And I've learned by overcoming ailments and illnesses to help others to do the same or better. And again, I see these opportunities as not the most horrible things in the world, even though I don't like injustice or the appearance of injustice. So I'm not going to say I'm going to stand by and let it happen. But at the same time, I had choices to make. And if somebody blocked those choices, I wouldn't have learned the things I have learned. Does that make any sense?
Totally. It makes total sense. I think that one of the problems with this generation, especially in the Western world, because like you say, there are areas of the world that don't have the possibilities that we've had, and they don't have the standard of living that we have. But on the contrary, they're more in touch with the real meaning of life. And they actually understand that happiness is not about what you have, but those who you have around you and how much they respect you and what you can do for them and they can do for you. Whereas we have come accustomed here in Canada, in the US, in Europe, and in the Western world, everything we kind of, like you said, we take for granted. And I think one of the things that have shaken a lot of people in this last 2 years of this whole COVID pandemic has been that suddenly their lives were shaken. And, oh, you mean I'm not going to be able to travel? Oh my God. You mean that I'm not going to be, and then it was kind of the end of the world. And you say, well, it is wrong that you're told that you cannot travel if you want to travel, because first and foremost is your freedom. But let's just rewind and understand that actually when you look back, every single generation has had to fight for freedom. And for some reason, we thought that because we're so sophisticated now in technology and we're so democratic and, the wars are things of the past within our own land, that's not true. We now have been able to see for ourselves how quickly tyranny can establish itself in any country. In the US, in Western Europe, in any country, tyranny, we have seen it. We are still looking at it, staring at it right in the face. And so I try to often tell people, hey, it's your turn to fight. Who told you we were never going to have to fight? So let's switch that gear on. Let's understand that sometimes we are going to have to fight for what matters, and freedom matters more than anything, because without it, what do you have? And when they're telling us that you don't have any choice of what goes into your body, I mean, that's the ultimate. That is absolutely the ultimate lack of freedom. You must be kidding me. And so I am glad that people have been shaken, because we needed to be shaken. Like you say, there's always a silver lining. And I think the silver lining in this pandemic is the fact that people are beginning to understand how much we were going astray, how much this whole materialistic consumerism craziness that we had was just making us lose touch with everything that is important, with everything that matters, and ultimately with the meaning of life. What is the meaning of life? And that, goes on to all sorts of questions that we can get into. But I agree entirely with you that sometimes you need to look at those, tribes and places and remote places to really understand, wow, we really lost the plot,
Yeah, trying to remember what is important. And I say that remember, I think we all, if we believe that we came from God and that we will return, that there is some part of us that is always present, but we have focused our attention elsewhere, so we forget, okay? And there are entities and forces that are contributing to that forgetfulness. They're encouraging it, but it's still, we have the choice to go, oh, okay, I'll go down that hole and see what that's all about. And I think that's also the freedom. As I said, the gift of life is the greatest gift. Just secondary to that, and it's aligned with it, is the gift of choice, that we have been given and granted the freedom to even screw up, to learn, really, and to come back by choice. I think that my perception of godliness is not by force. We force you to be godly. It's you choose to be. And I believe that's what's being asked of us. Yet, in order to choose it, we have to choose other things first to go, oh, that's not it. All right, I thought it was it. And now we are finding out how uncomfortable the choices we have made that we thought we're comfortable with, not so much. And then what is it that we value? We now shift our lives in some way. Like for me, born a city slicker in New York, right? New Yorker, right? Food came from the grocer's freezer. I didn't know about farms. I read about them. What is that? Milk just came in a carton. Who knows where it comes from? And then now to be someone who I love to get my hands in the dirt and grow things, right? And it's just like in those moments, the whole world dissipates, and you're in that moment and you're like in the presence of creation itself. And it's so simple. People go, oh, that's not a very worthwhile life to lead. It's like, well, who are we to judge each other on our lives? But at this point, the people that invested so totally in a materialistic worldview are going to struggle as these supply chain difficulties may increase. Hyperinflation may ensue because of the economic imperative of the international bankers that our founders warned us against. And we're living through, many have warned us, and we said, that's not real. That'll never happen. And now we're in the midst of it going, it's still not happening. And then you look back, it's like, I thought it wasn't happening. We're in the midst of it. Now I can't get all the things I'm used to and I'm accustomed to. And what do I do? And so this show and others like what I'm doing, many are growing in their reach and their voice despite censorship. Laura, what you're doing on Telegram, I believe, is also helping to provide a place for the wake up to occur and a little bit of direction for people that are kind of, I never considered this. I'm a little bit lost. Where do I go? What do I do?
Yeah. Well, it's going back to what you were saying about nature and you getting your hands in the dirt. There is a reason why, and if we look at, for example, Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030, which is really what we mustn't lose sight of, because yes, we are beginning to see that a lot of the COVID restrictions in certain countries are beginning to be dropped, and it looks like people are beginning to talk about, maybe this is over, maybe it's going to be over, although we're still, seeing places like New Zealand. I feel so much for the Kiwis, my God, or Austria, where the parliament has actually passed that the COVID vaccine should be mandatory or compulsory. So there's still a long way to see what happens with this whole pandemic. But people are beginning to talk about, maybe this is going to be over soon. But we mustn't lose sight of the overall plan that they have for us, which is Agenda 2021 or 2030. And so it's actually laid out. And one of the biggest factors in that plan that they've got for us is pushing everybody out of the land and into huge metropolis, into the cities.
Complete dependence, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everybody stacked one on top of the other. And why is that? One, because it's easier to control us. But two, because the further away you are from nature, the further away you are from God.
Yes.
And the further away you are from God, the more detached you are from your own power, right?
Well said, yes.
And so they're very clever. They love creating a synthetic life, and everything about what they do is synthetic, down to these vaccines that they're injecting into people.
Well, transhumanism is part of that agenda, as you know.
Exactly.
And you said it so well about driving people out of ownership of private property, that concept that you have a place, you get to determine what to do with it. And of course, now people are figuring out, hey, I got to start growing a garden, right? And these are the things that they want to avoid because that means self-sufficiency. They do not want that. They want you to be dependent for all of the reasons we've discussed and more than we have time to cover here. And you have a keen awareness of it. And yet still people are asking, well, it's kind of like the deer in the headlight scenario. Is the oncoming train coming so fast I can't get off the tracks, I'm too scared to move? Or do we have, as you remind people, the power to just step off the track and, well, 3 words, do not comply? Exactly. This is something we've heard more and more from more people. Bobby Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., coming from a liberal Democratic tradition of his uncle, who would be considered a right-wing extremist today if President John F. Kennedy were president today based on his politics of the day. But still, the acknowledgement of captured regulatory agencies, governments captured by those that are trying to control us, manipulate us, diminish our capacity for self-care and the freedom to care for one another when we have abundance to do so, and eliminate that so that all charity comes at the point of a gun, for instance. And so we have a little bit of ways to go. I don't say it's all instant, but the first step is do not comply when they try to make you do something that violates your fundamental beliefs about your existence, your divinity, etc. And this is a challenge that's coming, and it's getting uncomfortable for people because they didn't feel like they had to do that for a long time or ever, and now they do.
Yeah. Now they do, but you're right. It's our acquiescence that is prolonging this state that we're in. and they count with that. They know what they have to do for us to comply and for us to acquiesce. And that is, of course, that's why they drive the fear. That's why it's continuously fear, fear, fear for breakfast, fear for lunch, fear for dinner. Because when people are fearful, they freeze and they look for the first thing that tells them, you just need to hide over there. And they just run and they hide. Or you just need to do this, and they'll do it. And so, obviously, there's a lot of thought put into everything that they do. It's very carefully planned and engineered. And one of their biggest tools is fear to get us to comply. So do not comply is, like you say, the first step that we have to really drum into everybody's head. It is a choice. Don't comply. That is absolutely number one.
Laura, in addition to your website, there's also something you had established, I guess more recently, called United Democratic International Movement for Awareness and Freedom. Well, that's an unwieldy name, but that came through. It says a lot. And you say that its mission is as complex as it is simple. We hope to awaken humanity to its own power, to its unique and divine potential, and to raise awareness to the reality that a better world is possible and within our reach. We must simply dare to dream it, speak it, and action it. We dare. Do you? I mean, that's a nice... I like the challenge. I mean, some people might be, I'm offended. How dare you challenge me to do something so great? but I guess you're not talking to them. But for those that appreciate truth, faith, freedom, all of these things, what kind of things are people learning when they go, for instance, to your Telegram channel?
Well, a lot about the things that we've just discussed, a lot about what it means to be human, what it is to be human, the reason why we're here. I think all of that makes people feel like they suddenly have a purpose that they didn't feel they had before, and that they have a power that they felt they didn't have before. And so I'm a firm believer that we can change everything if we just set our minds to it. And it starts with having the vision. Everything, like I say in my website, everything that's ever been created started with somebody's vision. And when you share that vision with a lot of people, even more powerful does it become, and more likely it is that you will make that transformation and create that better future for all of us. I think it is within our reach. I'm not saying it is easy, but actually it is possible. And it takes everybody to stop complying. It takes everybody to have that vision for the future where we deserve better than we have been led to believe, and where we are more powerful and more creative. I mean, if there's one thing that is absolutely amazing about humanity and humans, is our creativity, as our power to create, to think and create things, and our wanting to live, that incredibly intrinsic force of life that is inside everything and every one of us, in nature, around us, and within ourselves, is what the evil side, as I call it, or the dark side, will never be able to defeat. It's impossible. They will try, but they will never make it. And this is why they want to transform life into something synthetic, and they want to transform humanity into transhumans, because that is the only way that they think they'll be able to control us. So it is important that we stay away from that.
If they dampen the human spirit enough, the light goes out, or almost goes out. The question is, can they have delusions of grandeur. They have for centuries or millennia. These attempts are not new. They're just new because the technology that they have at their fingertips, but also that technology is being used to outcreate their limited agenda, their suppressive agenda. And you pointed out creativity. I talk about imagination. I think that's another one of God's greatest gifts, the ability to imagine something and then make it manifest or participate in its bringing it to reality. And, you know, there are hundreds, if not thousands of years of a direction of humanity to kind of pretend that we're for you, but we're really keeping control over you, including the education system, maybe especially the education system, all the way up through the university, MD, PhD levels, which is now really adopted over maybe centuries, but certainly over the last 100 years, a very reductionist, materialistic worldview that we are just machines, a bunch of lumps of chemicals and chemistry that we can manipulate, as opposed to being divine sparks of creation itself. And that education system, although I'm not saying it can't be used for good because we can learn things, I appreciate and agree, but in many cases it's been used to dampen or maybe even worship the mind, which is a trick. It's a trap, because the mind is a tool. It is not soul. It is not the spiritual entity. It is just like a computer that you can program, or you can let other people program for you, and then you're running through life almost like a robot.
Definitely. I mean, education has become really indoctrination, and it started with the first industrial revolution. Schools needed to be there so that parents could work and children could become the next set of workers. And so it really is they are indoctrination centers, and education at the moment is in a really bad state. I mean, for starters, it's hardly changed since the first industrial revolution, whereas we live in a very, very different world with information at our hand. We're still making children learn in the same way, very backdated, very outdated, and actually never teaching them all of the things that are actually important to a human being as they grow older in life. We don't teach them about nutrition. We hardly teach them about relationships. We don't teach them about parenthood. We don't even teach them about money. So they come out of school, actually, they're not prepared for the world at all. Not school and not university. It's crazy. You then find yourself slowly having to learn all of these things as you go along, more than once, because you fall down the wrong hole and you go, oh my God, why didn't anybody tell me that was there? So my goodness, if I was in charge of education, I would change it. It would be a revolution. I would change it completely.
That's where I appreciate some of the movements like the unschooling movement, right? Mm-hmm. Where parents are just going, I think there was a whole movie about that, where they were just out in nature and learning about life itself. And the things, the great intelligence didn't come from rote memorization, although great intelligence was facilitated by the interaction with nature, and that they were also very well schooled and learned in the great classics and the basics of math and these kinds of things that are beneficial too. But we have denigrated that kind of learning for the purpose of what? Turning people into robots, to be the same, to serve the state, to serve somebody else's idea of what the state is, rather than acknowledge that we have great divine potential by our very creation, and we're here to learn about it for sure. And part of the process of learning about it is learning to suppress it or allow others to suppress it until we don't like it. And I've said this about freedom many times, and I'm sure others have said it as well. Until you want freedom, as much as you want oxygen, air, while your head is being held underwater forcefully, you are not willing to do all that is necessary to regain it and defend it. And we have lost sight of that, so we don't have the same appreciation of freedom. But in the little uncomfortable levels or directions that are occurring today, people are waking up to their love of liberty or freedom and saying, ooh, I didn't realize I did like it enough that I'm going to stand up and fight for it, defend it if I have to. And right now, we certainly do.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And this is, this war, I call it it is a war. We are in a terrible war between light and dark, between good and evil, between the Great Reset and the Great Awakening. And thankfully, all of the negative things that are happening come with that silver lining, which is making people wake up to the realization of a lot of things that we should have been aware of decades ago. But it's never late. The ditty's good, and I think that there is hope in the future. I believe in humanity. I believe in the fact that more and more people are waking up. I believe that people will stop complying, and I think this is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for humanity to actually rise up finally and start creating a better world for ourselves. There's always two ways to go about change. You can either choose to destroy or you can choose to create. And maybe right now we need a little bit of both. I don't know. I'm a creative type, and so I love to create. And I love it when I see small examples of, for example, we all know how many healthcare workers have been fired or have been forced to leave their very much loved and very much profession. And I love it when they suddenly get together and start their own clinic with their own rules. And, that's what I love, is that people will find a way to still do what they know how to do best and to contribute to society. And it's a wonderful thing to see other parallel systems being created. Because like I say, you can either choose to destroy the system that we know, which is Goliath.
It is crumbling of its own weight. The other aspect, you might have been about to go there, is that we simply withdraw our participation in that system and it crumbles. We don't have to declare war on it. We don't have to burn it down. it collapses because people are seeing the emperor, the medical pharmaceutical emperor, is wearing no clothes. And that's to your point about seeing so many medical and professionals, nurses, etc., leaving the profession, maybe against their will initially. But I've said, embrace the opportunity you've been given. You know, as a homeopath, I learned, 10 years of intense study as master-apprentice relationship. That's used to be how people learn to become doctors. It wasn't a rote memorization or a routine, watered down, everybody gets the same thing. And yet, my reluctance, this is true of the history of master-apprentice relationships, is like you want to stay in that apprentice relationship because you're learning so much, you appreciate so much the teacher, even if it can be abusive along the way, that at a certain point, life finds a way to collude to kick your butt out into the world with what now you've learned. Now you got to go out and take what you've learned in your own unique way and let it flow. And what I'm seeing here in that context is that a lot of people of their own accord, I can't wait to leave this profession. It wasn't that, but they were trapped in it. And now they are being freed from it, as opposed to being, I'm being unceremoniously dismissed. No, your freedom is coming back. And I'm meeting with medical professionals every week. And they're more open than ever to learn about these other systems of healing, more vitalistic, more honoring to the spirit, not just body or maybe even just body-mind. And so the opportunities you're talking about are happening, and the parallel systems are being discussed and created as we speak. It's not going to make the headlines. It's not going to be televised. It's going to happen because each of us are connecting with each of us outside of the constructs of limitation, right, that are occurring. And this is what I see with the Telegram channel you have, your website, the things we're doing here in broadcast media. It's very, very exciting in reality. And it's a different worldview when you go, oh, again, this is happening for our benefit. It's not happening to us because we're horrible people. This is a gift that we're being given right now.
Exactly. And I think it's a wonderful thing. Like you say, it's not being televised. And so people are not quite aware of how much is happening behind the scenes when it comes to truth seekers and when it comes to people that have become aware and awakened, is that they have also become empowered, and they've also go, well, maybe we can do something about this, and maybe we can do something better, and maybe I can get together with him and her. And there's a whole load of networks that are being created as we speak, of people that are fed up with the system, of people that are not willing to be pushed around anymore, and that are going to start creating, because like I said, humanity is creative. We have it in ourselves to create, and we'll find the ways, so this is something that I feel is really important, that people know that it's happening and that they can take part. I keep encouraging people to find like-minded individuals within their area, within their neighborhoods, within their communities, because from being able to speak freely and speak comfortably with others that get you and understand you, which is wonderful in itself, opportunities come out of that, opportunities to help one another, to create something together. And I think, like I was saying, there's always two choices. You can destroy and you can create. And I think that we can create all sorts of parallel systems that ultimately, like you said, will destroy this awful one that we've known for so long. Yeah. And so I always encourage people, it is possible. We can do it. Together we can do anything.
Laura Aboli, you're wonderful. Appreciate you coming on board today. I hope you enjoyed your time together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Robert. My pleasure.
And before you go, I asked you this and you kind of dodged it. I don't know why, but you have a lovely accent, but I can't place it. What's the origin? You won't say? Come on.
Yeah. So I was born in Spain. I'm Spanish. But I always went to English school. I was married to a South African for many years. So I picked a few things here and there. I had a long relationship with someone that had a very American accent. So I picked some from him too. Yeah. So I'm a little bit of nobody ever can pick up where I'm from.
Right.
So.
No, that was what I was picking up, that I can't pick up where you're from. It's all over the place. And it's fascinating. So that's the journey.
Yeah, that's the journey. My accent actually shows my history. Let's say that. It's a reflection of my history, both from where I grew up to the schools that I went to the people that have formed part of my life for a long time. I'm a little bit of a sponge when it comes to everything, and language is not different.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. And I think it's wonderful that the journey you've been on to lead you to this. quite an extraordinary journey. I imagine you probably have a number of books in you if you want to go that route, but regardless, what you're doing by communicating this through your Telegram channel and the website, very uplifting, and enjoyed connecting with you. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Thank you, Robert. Anytime. It was a pleasure.
All right. That's Laura Aboli. And what a journey. And y'all check out our website, check out our Telegram channel. Thanks once again, Kevin Tuttle, for connecting us. Super Don, did you enjoy that? Could you understand a word Laura said with that accent?
Of course.
I'm teasing Laura now. I think it's great. I think it was wonderful. But yeah, always a lot of fun to take these journeys, because people's journeys, and the last thing you said, Laura, was about finding your tribe. And I appreciate that so much, because people are indeed finding out their tribal members are not who they expected. And, you know, everybody goes to the same church, but there's a lot of different consciousness within that same church, for instance. And so people are now finding out who is living in fear and who is not. Now, we're encouraging people to go rise up beyond their fear, but we can't do it before they're ready. So we must be living examples for living outside of that fear, even though some people are afraid when you live outside of the fear and they get angry, right? So you have to protect yourself in that context. And there is the difficulty you brought up about family members or friends that have disconnected over this time. And maybe there will be a reunion, if not here, then in the heavenly realm. But, you know, always go with love and compassion, even though I know that's a challenge for any of us at any time on this planet. But I sense that you've seen that and are going forward with that, Laura.
Definitely, Robert. That's my hope, that we will all come together at some point. And I do believe that there's a lot of us that are really finding a lot of strength in unity. Like we're saying, we're creating a lot of networks, a lot of groups, a lot of great ideas, a lot of parallel systems. And I encourage people to do that, because that is a way that you can contribute to destroying a system that is about to engulf us if we don't do something about it.
Well, it no longer suits us. Let's just say it that. It no longer serves our purpose. And the purpose, you could argue, if you step up and detach from it enough, was a powerful and important purpose. Even though we now look at it, it's like it's denigrating, it's degrading, but it served to wake us to the point now where we want to reach out for the Spirit and remember who we are and rejoin our family, our real family, our true family. So, Laura, thanks again for being on board.
My pleasure, Robert. Cheers.
All right, cheers. Take care. Laura was terrific. Super Don, another winner. Thanks to Kevin Tuttle, connecting us with some great discussions and empowering discussions on many topics.